Welcome to Riverdale After Dark, a podcast about the CW's Riverdale that's invited you out on a double date. I'm Alex.
When you spend enough time walking in the shadows of Riverdale, the pep getting all over you, it changes you. It makes you shy away from your relationships and want to have sex with a car, apparently, because that's what everyone's doing in this episode. I'm Justin.
American Graffiti. I'm Pete.
And we are going to be, thanks Pete, talking about Riverdale Season 7, Episode 10. Really shaking it up at the end here, I gotta say.
I love it.
Chapter 127, American Graffiti. Now, of course, we're getting into spoilers for a second, but first, bit of a recap of what you need to know. All of the characters on Riverdale are back in the 1950s, and we got a couple of different trains running at this point. Reggie is newly moved in from out of town. He's on the basketball team. He's living with Archie, who is awfully sweet on Betty, and Reggie is not exactly sweet on Veronica, but Veronica is sweet on him, though she did mess it up in the last episode by prioritizing the business. She owns and runs a movie theater after school, I guess, called the Babylonium.
She thinks about it during school. It's a great project.
Exactly. I did the same thing. I ran a multiplex after school in high school. Anyway, so that's what's going on with him. With Veronica, yeah, she's going after Reggie, and Betty is going after Archie. That's the main stuff that you need to know this episode. Though Betty also has been grappling with a bunch of issues. Well, they've both been grappling with issues with their parents, but Betty in particular has been wrestling with her sexuality and figuring out her sexuality. Archie has been part of that, so they have been kept apart for a while, also so that Archie can get his grades up. His main parental figure, as Barry seems to be missing for the most part, is Uncle Frank.
Not around.
Who
She's a lawyer in the big city.
Even crazier hair this episode, I gotta say. Justin, I thought of you.
Does it look like he has a ripoff? It looks like a ripoff sweater. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like a second is just gonna,
That fits exactly what I was gonna say. I think he's becoming a Ken doll. He's slowly transforming. All his clothes come off with Velcro. He's no genitals at all. He's just smooth plastic. That's what my Frank theory. It's a tie-in with the Barbie movie. I'm telling you, that's a theory.
Already pushing the Barbie movie. Okay,
that's the new cat briefcase. Is Frank's a cat?
Meanwhile, over on the Shoney side of things, Cheryl and Toni have decided to try again after a little bit of a hiccup in their relationship. They are together. Toni has set up the Black Athena Book Club, which we find out a lot more about in this episode. It is exactly what it sounds like. It is a club for the students in Riverdale High to discuss works by Black authors. And Cheryl, as we see over the course of this episode,
as long as the discussion doesn't get too out of hand, they have someone
but
monitoring.
The big plot line that we're dealing with here is that Cheryl and Toni are both trying to have lives on their own while they're together, which is very different than how we saw them in previous seasons, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a moment. Kevin and Clay are together as well. That's important to know. They're a little bit minimized in this episode, but they still play into it. And Jughead Jones has struck up a friendship/flirtation with Tabitha Tate, who is back in town after her tour with Mrs. Till, Emmett Till's mother, around the country. She is back, and she gets sucked into Jughead's part of the plot line. We had the teaser at the end of the last episode where Sheriff Keller, a professional police sheriff, needed to have a teenager to come in and help him solve what's going on with the death of Jughead's mentor, Brad Rayberry, a science fiction author who also worked at Pep Comics. We know that Brad was killed by an evil milkman, most likely.
Right.
Well, we don't know. He could be a regular milkman.
No,
regular milkman. No, regular milkman.
Brad, lactose intolerant, dies of it.
I think in the 50s, if I've read the history correctly, regular milkmen could murder like once a month. Like they could kill every now and again.
As a treat.
Yeah, because think about your life. You're delivering milk. That's not great. Plus, everyone's mad because the milk's warm. Great? What, do you want to be a milkman?
I'm just saying it's a profession. You're bringing people something they need, and they're like, "Hey, thank you for bringing me milk." And you're like,
bring them something it's they my job. Choke down every day.
Yeah, I'm obviously anti-milk.
Oh my God!
Where are the milkmen now, Pete? Where are the milkmen now?
That's a great question. And that's all of the stuff going on in Riverdale. But before we get into the episode, there's something that I wanted to talk about here up front. We are taping this today on Thursday, June 1st. This is the final month of filming for Riverdale, the TV show. Ooh. We are starting to get not the main cast members, but there was a post by Zoe de Grand Maison, who plays Evelyn Evernever, who was like, taking my last flight home from the Riverdale set. Molly Ringwald did the same thing. We're going to start getting a lot more of those things. I believe yesterday or the day before, they had the final cast read for the final episode, which I think is called Goodbye Riverdale, if I'm getting the name correct, written by Roberto Casa, of course.
Tracks.
Yeah, there you go. And there's a lot of like, Lily Reinhart posted a still from the end that said end of series that she had grabbed from the script. So it's all happening. I legitimately am starting to feel emotional about this show ending and this cast saying goodbye. I was curious to hear how you guys are feeling.
My thoughts are on sort of on two tracks. One, yeah, it is sad. The idea that this is a finite thing. I know it's something very present in Pete's mind for a lot of the season. I haven't really been feeling it until you see them actually being like, no, we are done and it's going away. So that is emotional. It's making me excited to get to the finale and knowing that we're going to get to see it, because the other track I've been thinking on is with the writer's strike happening and the probable SAG strike, they're literally going to get this done right under the gun. Mm-hmm. Like the SAG strikes at the end of June, and they're going to finish this shooting, fingers crossed, barely in time to get it all done before they would have to stop, and the season would probably be prematurely ended. So that is amazing. It's the ultimate Riverdale like race against time to get things done.
Well, and let me throw this out at you. We've talked on a lot of the different podcasts we do about the writer's strike, and Justin being in production, you know this a little bit
as
better.
a line producer.
As a line producer.
No.
But production is wrapping on June 23rd, unless they need some sort of extension. This has happened in previous seasons where they've had to go over a day or two with shooting. So entirely possible that might be happening. You just touched on this, but if the not writer strike, if the Screen Actors Guild strike and the Directors Guild strike happens, those contracts run out on June 30th. So they still do have a little bit of time there to finish the actual shooting of episodes. Let's say, sake of argument, June 23rd, they do actually finish everything. They still got a week there before the strike happens. Then the strike happens. We still have episodes coming out until August 23rd. What potentially gets stopped at that point? Do they still need to do ADR at that point potentially for episodes? Are there other things that potentially couldn't happen if that triple strike does happen?
I don't think so. With taking them in reverse order, the Directors Guild, which may or may not strike, negotiations are still happening. They haven't done a strike authorization vote. I'm in the DGA as well, so I am apprised of that situation. Their work is done. Once production stops, director's out of the picture. You are right, ADR, which is like adding lines, voiceover after the fact. This show is heavy voiceover. ADRs when you go back and add a line, sort of insert it to try to fix a scene or something, or if you change a line afterward. The trick with that is if they're changing a line, that's technically writing, so they probably can't do that anyway. So any voiceover, I bet they'll just wrap up before the strike would go into play at the end of June. And the writers, like I said, obviously striking, so you can't really be changing anything, even though Roberto wrote this episode and he's the showrunner. He will no doubt be on set for the filming. He still cannot change any lines, or that is a breach of the picket line.
Yeah, I will say I was very happy to see his name on the script for the final episode. I've been saying this for seasons at this point, but he is so good at bringing out the themes of Riverdale in the clutch. Like we've talked about so many seasons here where it's like, this is insanity for however many episodes. And at the end, you're like, oh yeah, that brought it together somehow. That's crazy. So I feel very good and very excited about him writing the finale. Just in terms of the ADR thing, I will mention, and I think maybe I mentioned this back at the beginning of the writer's strike, but I honestly don't remember if we talked about it on this podcast. But I have a director friend who was working on a show, and she was saying that like the days before the writer's strike, the showrunner was just doing literally every single possibility they could think of ADR lines, writing them in advance. So it seems like they were very well prepped for this. So there's an entirely possibility they have the script. They probably have options written out as well so that the writers potentially, the actors could tackle them.
A show like this where there are a lot of moving pieces and I feel like they do swap the order of things potentially in post-production and the edit. So like they probably will just, like you're saying, have those lines covered off. Like, oh, if we end up with this version where we do this scene A, B, and C in this order, we'll have that. If we switch it and do C, B, A, we'll make sure we have the lines to connect the scenes the way they need it to. So like I'm saying, like you're saying, this show has been running for 7 seasons. It's professional. They are on top of everything. They know that everything in front of them. I'm sure they're buttoned up.
Yeah, and to that end, the one last thing that I'll mention, another little goodbye that happened, Imperial Mammoth, who we had on the podcast, who does the music, as of this taping yesterday, they said they were doing their last recording session. So it sounds like all the musical numbers are hopefully going to be locked up as well. So, So sad. It's all happening. We still got several months in our time for the podcast.
So how many apps left?
How many apps left? 10 more apps. By the way, I said it wrong in the last podcast. I think I threw out there 22. It's not 22. It's 20 episodes. So This is episode 10. 20 minus 10, Pete, is 10. So
don't give me the 20 minus bullshit. You fucked it up last time.
I did.
Yeah, you fucker. I went to Cornell and I can't add. All right, bro.
That's subtraction, but sure.
Oh, man. So lots going on in this episode. I want to tackle something first, if I could. What do we think? The end of this episode and this whole episode is Reggie and Archie are sort of riding together. And we get a little conversation later on between them. The Archie-Jughead friendship sort of isn't a thing. They're not even at all connected. Archie and Reggie seem to be very tight. How do we feel about that? That feels very strange to me when so much of the show has been built around Archie and Jughead.
Pete, how do you feel about this one?
Well, I mean, it's fun. It's fun to see them, because Archie is kind of like prime goofball when he's with Reggie, and it's a fun side that sometimes we don't get to see of Archie. So it's nice to have him have somebody, as Reggie pointed out, Jughead's not going to geek out about cars and stuff with him. So
sorry, I think his name is Soup Can.
Yeah, beef soup. It's beef soup.
I think that was a reference probably to Souphead Jones, who is the identical smaller cousin of Jughead Jones in the comics, who we heavily speculated, or at least I heavily speculated, was going to be showing up, I believe, in season 3 or 4, if I remember correctly. He didn't, by the way, in case anybody's wondering.
Whoa, what a surprise. Let's not revisit any weird theories.
Yeah. We don't have that kind of time.
What we should do is, real quick, just listen to every episode we've ever done of this podcast, write down all of our theories, and say which ones have come true.
Wow.
I mean, I will say we
work out the ratio. We've been pretty good.
We had a pretty good hit rate, I will say, but we also have said plenty of.
Did we have a good hit rate? I think
Justin was right about like 2 things.
Okay, well, I'll take it. It feels bigger in my mind, but
I'm not familiar with sports, but if you make 1 goal a season, that's pretty good.
Not good.
Right?
Nope.
That's good.
I think they call that a hat trick. I'm just saying Frank is turning into a Ken, and that's all I'll leave as my prediction.
I like this relationship because I like KJ Apa and Charles Melton. Clearly like each other. I think I was definitely feeling this episode, Jughead, even with he's with Tabitha, but he's very much been off on his own, which I think is, like we talked about last podcast, I believe, that's sort of part of the story, right? He is much more the outsider nerd than he was even in the beginning of the show in this season here. So why would he be friends with Archie, who's a jock who hangs out with the basketball team all the time? It wouldn't necessarily happen. They know each other, but they don't really hang out with each other. I want to see everybody together by the end of the season. I want to see the whole gang together and everybody working together.
And I think they will.
I want to get out of the 50s so we can maybe get some forward movement on some relationships. You know what I'm saying?
I throw something out at you, and you're going to hate this, Pete?
I agree with you.
I think this is maybe my favorite season of the show ever.
Oh, you say
I
that
did
so
think you
many
were going to say
times.
that.
You say that so often.
I
dude.
do
Go
say
F
that so
yourself.
often. If you go
Yeah.
back, you know what we should do is we should go back and listen to the podcast and talk about. No. But legitimately, like on the relationship, on just like the purity of the characters, watching the actors have fun with each other. Obviously, like there are things that are better probably about season one. If I went back and watched that right now, I'd be like, that statement I just made was very stupid. But at the same time, I
Wow.
think we are actually getting to spend time with these characters and find out about them. Like we talked about a million times, they are not different characters. They're just different takes on the characters. They're still the same people. They're still the same actors. It's still the same setting. And like, this is jumping over, but with Shoni, this is the first time we've seen Cheryl and Toni date and talk about things. In previous seasons, everything has been so hectic and insane and over the top that we haven't gotten to get those little nuanced moments where they just chat with each other about things. And I think it's this, to tie it back to the Reggie and Archie of all, I think it's the same thing with them. What I'm really enjoying about the relationship is just like, how do these two actors work together even more than how do these two characters work together, you know?
Well, and I hear you on that. This is definitely the season with the most sort of confidence, swagger, and like, let's get everything in a way that doesn't feel jam-packed. Because I think this is, you're always thinking about the endings when you're working on something like this. And so they've been building up and playing it out. And I think, weirdly, for the fact that characters are back in the 50s and younger, they're actually more mature in a way and able to like sort of self-identify and sort of find their core beliefs a bit faster. And we don't have as much time spent on like random murders so far, but I feel like we're going to get that way. What I thought you were going to say, Alex, because I agree, I do like the season. I feel like we're going to spend most of the rest of the season right where we are. I don't think we're going flashing forward till maybe even the last episode.
Yeah, I agree
Don't
with that
say
as well.
that. Don't say that.
I thought they
Don't
were only
put
going to
that
go
out
half
there.
a season. They are still filming, as we talked about, for another 23-ish days at this point, and they're still in the 1950s. So if they do jump forward, it's probably at this point just going to be the last episode. I'm very
or maybe
curious.
even almost like an epilogue.
Yeah.
You're just don't put
Enjoy
that
what
out there, man.
You know what it
It's
might
not-
be? Here, let me throw a theory out at you. And Pete, this is not to rile you up in any way, but what if like we have 1950s the entire season? Like you're saying, there's an epilogue where their children look at their skeletons lying there decades later and they're like, wow, would have loved to find out what happened to these people. And that's it.
Well,
That's
and
the
let me
end of
say,
Riverdale. Just their skeletons. And it's
Yeah.
clear whose skeletons is who because they still have their hair.
Who's winning there, Zelvin? Who wins? in that
skeleton
scenario?
fans?
and Riverdale becomes the town
Skelefans
with
is what we call
skulls.
it. Yeah.
Skelefans. The town with skulls.
Yeah.
Rather than
By the
pet-
way, everybody should check out my Skelefans. There's some pretty spicy content on there.
Yeah. Not to be confused with Skelefants, which is my elephant skeleton graveyard that I've been working on. I think it's hard. I think it's hard to the more mature ideas they're dealing with, bigger themes. It's hard to then throw a time jump in the middle, to be like, hey, we're
Don't you
dealing
dare!
with.
Riverdale has done so many insane things.
Well, here,
Of
I'll throw
course.
this out to
Put that
you.
past
The
Riverdale.
structure that they have talked about nonstop. We've talked about this. I think we talked with Roberto about this, if I remember correctly, but there was this thing that Greg Berlanti emphasized to him before the first season where Greg Berlanti said, hey, what you do is you don't wrap it up in the last episode because then you don't see the emotional fallout. You wrap it up in the second to last episode. And then you spend the last episode dealing with emotionally whatever this conclusion does for the characters. That clearly made a big impression on Roberto Aguirre-Sacasa. He did that for the first season. They've done that for almost every season. There's been one or two seasons where it's actually wrapped up in the final episode. And I think that's worked fine as well. But I do think there's a chance that's what we're going to get here is we will get 1950s Time Jump Tabitha back in episode 19. They shift the timeline forward. And that last episode is the one where we spend in the timeline we have known and loved for 6 seasons. But we still get the emotional fallout of whatever it means that they've been in the 1950s for 19 episodes at this point.
All right, enough speculation. Let's get into the episode already.
Fine. Well, okay. Well, let me talk about this actually, just sort of generally about the season then. And this is not speculation. Actually, this is speculation. I'm going to do this anyway. I don't care. But getting back to what I was saying about like semi-jokingly about this being the best season, I wasn't joking. I'm not going to apologize.
What's happening?
I don't know what I'm doing right now.
There are two Alexes involved
Inside of
fighting
everybody.
with each other.
One of them is a sexy skeleton. The other is sexy.
Shut up! What?
Muscles.
What? Get
Muscles.
to it. Get to it.
Can we get back and talk about milk for a second and whether we like drinking milk?
Yes, because here's the thing: the fact that there are milkmen implies there are men for every different product we have in our home.
Oh man,
there are
cheese men?
soda men, cheese men,
bread
you
men?
have your cucumber men, all of the men.
All of the important stuff.
Do they all look as creepy as the milkman does when he's delivering at night?
They're carrying very specific things at nighttime. It's very weird.
Purple stuff men,
The way that they've
Sunny
been planning
D
out
men.
the season, and this was really driven home to me by this episode, is they've been really meticulous in terms of the way they are plotting out the relationship arcs for the characters, and I really enjoy that in a way that it's clear where they're going about stuff, particularly halfway through the season, but we are slowly taking our time and building it together. Pete, I am talking about literally the episode right now. So, for example, as I was saying with Shoni, we have this move from should we be together? Okay, let's be together. What does that mean? How do we work together as a couple? And that's what we're seeing in this episode. Do we need to be having the same lives at the same time and doing the same things? Or can we do separate things but still be together? And that's what they figure out here. And I thought that was great. Similarly, if we go over to the double date portion of the episode, we're getting this progression to Betty and Archie clearly like each other, but they're doing this great slow burn over the course of the season where these hiccups keep coming in the way. And in this case,
Cars.
Well, Reggie and Archie bonding about cars.
That's going to be my point.
Reggie and Veronica. Yes.
What chemistry? Every time those two are together, there is nothing. Archie would rather be looking out a window than be, sitting across from the girl that he's supposed to be in love with.
Pete, I know you've been shipping Karchi for so long, which is Archie and his car, finally being together. And so, this must be such a win for you that you have Karchi finally coming true.
I'll tell you, it is. There's a couple wins that I definitely want to talk about. One of them being that Betty and Archie still, I don't see any chemistry ever.
Yeah, I don't think you have anything to worry about there besides every factor in the show pointing at that. But how did you feel about?
They can say as much as they want. As soon as you get them together, they're like, "Oh, hi," and then there's nothing. Anyways,
how did you feel about Regiacle, which is Reggie and his vehicle getting together?
Well, I think it's Regella because
Bella is gorgeous.
Ooh, correct me if I'm wrong, but Bella was previously a haunted car, right?
Looks like it.
Funny. And when you're working on a car, you got to make sure you get the ghosts out.
That's one of the first things you do.
That's why Betty's there at the end of the episode to get the ghosts out because
she had a ghost wrench. She had a ghost wrench in her hand at the end.
But I tell you what, Fangs and Midge has been glorious these last couple of episodes. I love the chemistry that they have, and I'm really worried about where their relationship is headed and what's going to happen to them. But I think it's I really like what they're doing with it, and it's so. It feels really nice every time they're together.
It's interesting. The show seems to be sort of jumping around less, but we seem to be jumping around more when we discuss it because we're just very excited. But to maybe talk about Fangs and Midge real quick, they have they're married basically in a nice way. They're having a baby. Fangs walking around with his guitar for no reason.
Oh yeah, no. If you're the guitar guy, you rock with the guitar. I love that.
That's a heavy. You carry your guitar to school. Where do you put your books?
Worth it.
I'll mention, so the plot line here is that he gets an opening gig for Richie Valens, who somebody on Tumblr pointed out to me. Richie Valens at this point in 1955 was 13 years old, so doesn't really make sense. But I want to emphasize to everybody again, none of this, this is a feature. They are purposefully messing with the timeline and not caring. They're doing a wash of 50s, 60s Americana, and that's it. So I wouldn't worry about these sort of anachronisms too much. This has been true every season of the show. It's always true. It's always going to be true.
Yes, and he also rocking his Serpents jacket, and it made me think, what's up with the Serpents? What are they? Are they just a merch line at this point?
In the 50s, they were mainly T-shirts and jackets.
Became a gang.
Started.
They're a pretty rough gang. If you remember back in the episode with the dance, they were going to stand in the parking lot and throw eggs at people if fags didn't get to play songs at the dance. That's some pretty rough gang behavior. I grew up in LA, and it was the same sort of thing with the Bloods and the Crips. They were always throwing eggs.
Dude, no.
What?
No.
What, Pete?
No, you can't make that joke, dude.
Well, here's the thing. In a community centered around pops, like eggs are really important because that's what you get in your.
Well, speaking of
breakfast.
pops,
Yeah,
what
where
a
do you
guy!
think they
Give
get
it
their
away.
eggs? Is it from some sort of creepy nighttime egg bed?
Oh yeah, the Eggman comes around. The Beatles sang about the Eggman.
Hang on, I do want to point out that that moment with Reggie and Pops was really nice and very cool of Pops to give him not only a car, but Reggie was so happy he hugged him. I thought it was such an adorable moment.
I know. That's the same ratio I work. When someone gives me a car, they get one hug. One and only one hug, and that's what Reggie gives him right back.
I thought it was, this is the 50s, man.
How many cars do you think-
handshakes? They upgraded to a hug. That was pretty cool.
Upgrade. How many cars do you think Pops is sitting on? He's like, it's just a leave behind.
He has, now that the dark room has moved to an entirely different location, he has all that space under Pops. That's probably a secret car garage. He's basically like Batman.
Yeah, like sort of a two Pops, two Furious situation where he's got
has a pop cave. A pop cave. That's where he keeps his cars and also his Funko Pops.
Oh, wow.
Wow, the darkness of the Pop Cave. He has trophies from all of the villains he's vanquished, like when someone wanted to buy the diner once.
Like the Burger Meat Man and the Milk Shake Mix Man. I don't know. How does one make milkshakes?
Wow. You don't know how to make a milkshake? It's right in the name.
You don't just shake milk until it's a milkshake.
Yeah, until it curds.
Yes,
you just drink the curds.
Yum, curds.
I think we covered everything, right? All right.
Yeah, we're
nice
good.
Job.
That's it for Riverdale After Dark. Now, what else there's other plot lines. Why don't we talk about the Jughead and Tabitha plot line? Because that was pretty emotional and tense in the middle of everything that was going on. They are investigating the murder of Brad Rayberry together. They find out he has a secret wife who is black. They were driven apart by racism. It's obviously paralleling a lot of other things in the episode. The Black Athena Book Club, which we also haven't talked about, so we can't really wrap up yet, as well as, of course, Jughead and Tabitha's burgeoning relationship. I thought this was great. I thought this was really well played and interesting. And Pete, I'll mention for you, but also for other Bughead shippers, there was a lot of consternation about like, oh man, investigating was Bughead's thing. What are we doing here? I think Jughead and Tabitha investigating, very different vibe than Jughead and Betty investigating, and I liked it as well in a different way.
Yeah, it was, I had that emotional roller coaster with this app where it was like, I got worried that Betty's just going to be in the garage with Archie and Reggie, and Tabitha's going to be out solving crimes with Jughead, which is sweet and it kind of is a nice kind of thing, but it's tough because it ruins my ship that I'm pulling for. So yeah, it's kind of I thought the show did a really great job with it. I thought it was very sweet and very touching. But yeah, it was a little bit of my heart or my hopes breaking because I was like, I was hoping that was going to be the key that got Betty back.
He's slowly coming around to Tabitha, Pete. I hear it in your voice deep down.
Don't you dare. Don't you dare. I'm not giving up. I'm not giving up.
Well, here's to double down on what I was saying earlier. I think what worked about this is this plot line wasn't really about the investigation. It was about Jughead and Tabitha and their relationship and figuring out, even if they don't know what they mean to each other yet, what it would mean to each other and what would happen to each other if they tried to get together. So I thought that was really smartly constructed. It gave us information and it gave characters information about what's been going on, why maybe Brad Rayberry was murdered, or maybe it's just a crazy milkman who's killing people. I guess we don't know. But at the same time, it got back to, like I was saying, overall for the season, it sucks that Aaron Westbrook has not been here and will continue to not be here for many episodes, but they're clearly spacing out and slowly building Jughead and Tabitha as, I think, frankly, another endgame relationship here, but they're giving it time and they're exploring it, and that's what we got in this episode.
it just seems like Tabitha is going through a lot just to be able to get someone to help her with the homework so she doesn't miss any assignments.
Have you ever tried to get somebody to help you with your homework? It's a pain in the
very
neck.
hard. Well, and let me say, I think there's the scene later in the episode is a little beyond her really needing to get her homework pages. That's the way they're going to stay in touch.
Oh yeah, the whole letters thing, it could be super sweet and emotional. I think I'm super happy with, of course I'm saying this as a white dude, but I think the kind of racial moments and the stuff with the kind of group discussing the books and discussing bigger topics have been really nice throughout, and I think it's been really well done and kind of cool. So I've been very much enjoying it.
I agree, and I mean we got to remember that's where the season sort of started in a very serious way. To have this discourse on race pop up could be sort of a miss. It could feel like unearned, but I do think the way they've been able to sort of find it or land on it as a topic across plot lines in these different episodes is good, and it's being handled both from an external issue to discuss, but also emotionally with all the characters that we're seeing here. And I agree, it's handled really well, and I would not have guessed that it would be if I knew that's what this season would be discussing a lot.
Well, same thing with the Cheryl Toni stuff, to jump over to the Black Athena Book Club, which that was giving me knots in my stomach, that whole plot line in terms of Toni clearly being very hesitant, and I think rightly so, given we've watched what Cheryl does over the course of 7 seasons at this point, to be like, maybe you shouldn't come to this book club.
She bulldozes things, she just 100%. Kind of like,
And to have this outcome where Cheryl, and it still feels consistent with Cheryl, like understands the book, loves the book, gets called out on it and be like, this is the first book by a Black author you've read, right? And her then to not be like, whatever, quippy nickname, I'm out of here, but instead be like, yeah, you're right. And then eventually at the end tell Toni, this is your thing. I'd love to come there for the readings. I really appreciate it. Thank you. But this is not for me. I thought was a phenomenal outcome and legitimately a great model for a relationship for the younger viewers watching the show, which I was very surprised about.
Well, and even though it's set in the 50s, I feel like their relationship in this episode is so modern. It's so you know what? We are two separate people, but we're coming together because we care for each other, maybe love each other. And we're going to figure it out together. The mature Cheryl that we're getting, not a lot of shows get the chance to take their character, their sort of agitator character, and literally change her, rewrite her in a way where she becomes sort of a better version of herself, a version that is ready to love and be in love with someone, with their partner.
Also, they're not just kind of I like that we're seeing moments, Zalman talked earlier about spending time with these characters. The moment after the meeting where, Cheryl and Toni talked was really nice. It was great to see them kind of talk about what they were going through while the meeting was going on, because we were all like, how is this going to go? So the fact that they got to kind of talk about it too was nice.
And I like that she said she saw her family in the Daltons when they were talking about Native Son. And that level of sort of being this is a problem. I identify in myself, that level of openness. It's something that, like you said, Alex, Cheryl has always pulled back from and hasn't been able to confront and just waves away by being sort of flip about it. But she confronts it spot on. It was great.
Well, and I think this is something that we already talked about earlier in this episode, but I think what this season is allowing to do, and this is why really this episode in particular is one that got me very excited for the direction that they're heading in, is they are allowing these characters to grow. These characters have been in stasis for a very long time, and I think that's part and parcel with them coming through the comics. That's what they're like decades. For decades, I think that's kind of the point, but they've been stuck in their issues, and we're watching them. They're, again, not different characters. We are watching them work through these issues and become better, fuller people. I think that goes over to everything that we've been talking about with Betty's plot line as well, is that Betty, whether you like it or not, has always dealt with the darkness inside her, which is wrapped up in sexuality and all of these other things that are going on in her life that are horrible. And they keep hitting that plot line over and over. And this version of Betty is dealing with this and grappling with this and trying to understand this in a much healthier and mental forward way. Something that I was very aware about, just to jump back to the Cheryl and Toni thing, is I was trying to feel out, like you said, Justin, that it feels very modern. I I agree with you. And I think they modulated, though, on the side of this is not people in the 2020s doing this. This is people in the 1950s, but having a bit of the awareness of the 2020s. And maybe that's something they're playing with. Like, nobody's like, I am an ally, and stands up and uses that
Yeah.
or anything like
Yeah.
that. Like, it still feels like it's of the
Just good.
time. But I don't know. Again, I'm sorry, Pete, to get into speculation, but I do wonder if that's going to be the overall lesson of the season, as we're going to learn, is they are going to get back to their time period, but to be able to retain this emotional growth that they've gone through to be better, stronger, happier people.
Yeah, I bet the memories fade, but the core changes persist into the. If we're saying like maybe the last episode, they're transported to their modern time. I think that could be a good way to sort of do all of this at once and have it be meaningful.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, I wanted
to
a couple more things about the Tabitha Jughead story. I love the sort of Law and Order style clue following that happens here, where it's like Jughead talking to Fieldstone. You know anything about Rayberry? Nope, nothing at all. Except he sent his money to a small town in South Carolina. I was like, come on, dude. And he kept being like, dead, you say? Huh. Imagine I was like, this is a guy.
You writers.
Yeah,
Dead.
you writers.
I love
dead.
that. My fondest hope is to be remembered in a bemused manner by a comic book editor who barely cares after I die.
Wow. That's
Beautiful.
a low bar.
Yeah. It's a
Hey,
low bar.
but
Probably
it
gonna
You
is
have
fun.
children, and that's what you want. I mean,
That's
you don't
what
want
I
any
want.
of your
That's
kids
what I want. I
to
want
just be
somebody
like,
at Marvel
oh,
to be like, huh, that guy. Well, anyway, back to business.
wow.
Why did I become a comic book editor? Because my dad wanted to be dismissed by by me after he died. But you're his son. Nope, he wanted a comic book editor.
Yeah.
A couple other things on the Jughead Tabitha stuff. I love that he was murdered. Suicide people don't use the mail. I was like, okay, well, that is technically a clue because he sent a letter to South Carolina. And then them on the phone where he's like, he's talking to June for the first time, telling her that her partner is dead. And she's like, who are you? And he's like, my name is Jughead. I know your partner.
Well, it's a
It's
hard
like,
call
This
to
is real.
make. It's a hard call to make. You know, he's nervous. You know.
100%. But I'm saying if he introduced himself with his name, that would have been very odd.
Yeah. What if
Hi, I'm Jughead
Should we talk
Jones.
about the whole Betty Veronica stuff? We haven't really gotten into that yet. We touched on the Reggie and Archie side of it, but they are trying to pursue their boys, and the boys only care about cars. Love Betty and Veronica in this episode. I think they're great. They're super fun together. It's fun seeing their friendship develop in this way. It's good. I'm enjoying it.
I agree. I thought this was fun. And I think we got some interesting clues pointing us down to the future. We've got, at the beginning of the episode, Archie saying they're having a Marilyn Monroe versus Elizabeth Taylor discussion. And Archie's like, Marilyn all the way, implying Barchi. But when the conversation is had between
Take
Betty
it
and
easy.
Veronica, she's like, Paul Newman, who I think is the Archie of those two. But then she's like, you know what? I'd love to screw around with Marlon Brando for a while. I was like, she's going to get with Reggie briefly before coming home to Archie.
Yeah. Now, what do you think?
Interesting
Because
clue.
Reggie mentions Elizabeth Taylor is hotter, which obviously means Veronica, but
Veronica.
also Uncle Frank mentions Elizabeth Taylor. So, do you think like?
What the fuck? You guys are really reading into a lot of things here.
No,
man.
no, no. I'm obviously horribly joking and strike that from the record, but I do think Reggie is saying like whether he's opening it or not, he's going for Veronica. Archie is definitely going for Betty. I do think that's what we're heading towards eventually. But like you said, yeah, I do think we're gonna get a little bit of a Betty.
Yeah, I think we're going to get a little detour in there. And let's not forget, Frank is obviously interested in Barbie, above all. One other thing about...
you can bank on that as the ship name.
Yep, exactly. One other thing, like they're talking with Frank. Frank always eavesdropping. Frank, what did you get a job? Go do something. He's
Hey,
always just
hey,
like
come on,
listening
man.
to Archie. But he's like,
His
we get the
job,
reveal.
his job is looking crazy in the morning, Justin. Come on.
That's right, and he's killing it.
He is crushing. He's the CEO of looking insane. I'll give him that. But he talks about how Frank and Fred shared a car, and I was like, when they were kids, and this is the 50s, I think he means a horse.
No,
Dude,
they had cars.
take it easy,
They had
guy.
they
Come
had a
on.
car.
How old is
horse.
Frank? How old is Frank in this?
Frank
40?
is probably 26.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a hard
Now,
26 back then, dude.
Yeah.
Even that, if Frank is 26, which is a stretch, that puts him in what, 1920, late 20s?
That's not
1929?
Okay, let me once again explain how subtraction works, just real quick.
No, I just did it. 1929. Get out of my life. I know how it works. 1929. What cars are driving around? He's got a Model T that they're like, hey, let's share this first car in the world.
Maybe.
Still
Maybe.
counts.
I don't know. Anything could happen.
No.
I did like Frank talking to Archie and being like, yo, dude, have some perspective on life. Think about what, Reggie's going through here, and I thought that was really, I liked the Archie Reggie kind of arc that we got here, and Archie kind of doing some growing as a person. I thought it was where they got to eventually before they saw that their car was abandoned was very sweet and fun. That kind of.
Now, let me ask you, were you guys car people? Like, the implication here that these two guys can think of nothing but cars is insane to me. Even the girls, the Betty and Veronica, when they pull up, they're like, "Ooh, look at that car!"
I think more
that car
pictures
looks like,
of my car on my phone than anyone in my family. What are you talking about, dude?
So
When
first
you get
time you saw yourself represented on screen, right, Pete?
Yeah, I mean, your first car is a huge deal if you
What did you
get
have?
lucky enough to get one. I had this beat up, oh man, it was great. 85 Buick Century, two-toned gray. The thing was a boat. It was glorious.
man, what a great, and your person, that's how I would describe your personality. That makes a lot of sense.
I think the idea of this plot line is they're a little more about each
care.
other and hyping up each other than anything. And the car is just, no pun intended, but like it's just a vehicle to talk about the Reggie Archie relationship. I thought they did. I thought it was very fun.
No.
The whole thing. I'm sorry. The whole scene of Archie waiting up for Reggie and doing the
That was
whole parents thing.
hysterical. That was hilarious.
So funny.
Right.
And ultimately, yeah, it's them like hyping each other up about these cars. It's being distracted about it. It's them being distracted by each other because they kind of want the same things, which are Betty, Veronica. Like
The whole
I will
Archie.
say-
I'm not reducing Betty and Veronica to vehicles, but like they are the cars. Like that is what it is. Like the car is woman. That is the thing you're focused on. And they are displacing their wants and needs onto this thing because they can't fight about the thing that they actually want, which is Betty and Veronica.
Wow,
Whoa.
interesting take.
That's a lot. That's a lot to unpack there.
I sort of agree with you. Oh, go ahead.
I just going to say I'd like to go back to the what Justin had for her first car here.
I had a very beat up Ford F-150 truck, white with a red tailgate. Had two gas tanks, so I felt like my own sort of like I had my own pop cave to going home to when I switched from gas tank A to gas tank B.
Wow, man.
And Alex, you had a horse, right?
Yeah, because I was born in quick subtraction here in 1920.
1800s.
Oh, 1800s, yes. Pre-Model T days. I actually shared it three-way with Frank and Fred. First car.
I have a couple of follow-up questions on your choice of words there. Now, do you think
Frank went with the lack of genitals?
Yeah, see? That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Theory coming true. When Betty mentions taking the bus, do you think that turned Archie on more because a bus is a larger car?
No, I mean,
What was his deal with walking? That's my big question here.
He was like, it seemed to me from an outside perspective of someone that's
You're not an
excited
inside perspective.
to take
You're involved
a
in this
car.
plotline, Pete.
He's got a car and he wants to take Betty out on a date. And then he's thinking about like, oh man, this is going to be our first date. I feel, in my mind, it would have been cooler if we could take my ar.
Of
and
course.
He was just hurt that he was like, walking, that's
I
the
will
opposite
say,
of my car.
In order of things, bus is the least sexy.
Yeah.
Then walking, and car is the most sexy. So, like, he made the right choice, but maybe he should trick out a pair of shoes, get an old pair of shoes and fix them up. 2 little jalopies on his feet.
One thing I do want to mention just positively about the cars is, or more about the episode, is we got a bunch of great driving shots. Like the overhead shot of the river, them driving on the road, doing all that stuff. It's clearly Vancouver, and that's fine, but it looked really nice, and it was nice to see that stuff in the middle of, we've been on a lot of sets and not a lot of naturalistic backgrounds, so it looked very good.
I agree. I would definitely want to highlight this as well. The driving shots looked great. They actually shot them. A lot of times in TV, you fake a driving shot because it's a pain to shoot because you got to put the cameras on, like mount them on the car or do what's called car to car, which is you have to close the road for that, where you have the camera on a separate car that you're shooting alongside. And then you have the actors driving, which is also not great because you never know if they're actually good at it. So anyway, it looked amazing and they really did it. It was very cool. And it was great because the drone shots, we saw the river and we saw the Dale. It finally made sense.
Okay, I'm putting it together. One other car thing that I thought was very funny, and by the way, I was right there with them, but there were fans for months. Vanessa Morgan and Madeline Petch had put up pictures of them in the car from this episode, and people are like, oh my God, it's going to be a Shoney car date. They're going to make out in the car. This is going to be great. Here we go. Hyping it up for months. And I was like, oh, okay, that sounds good. I'm excited for that. And then the fact that it was actually the two of them with Midge in the back, and then also Betty and Veronica get in the car was very funny to me. I was like,
very funny.
That was the way off.
The real conversation starter in that was the giant flask that
Tony's partying, man. She was like, hop in, more the merrier. I was
you
like,
could fit a whole bottle of whiskey in that.
I was like, I don't know if Tony's going to make it to the venue, guys.
I was surprised we didn't get to see Fangs' concert. I wonder, I was looking forward to like a classic everybody goes to the same event episode, and they kept being like, can't wait to go to that concert. That's going to be a wild time. It's going to get really out of control. You really shouldn't be there, Midge. And then they're like, well, that went well.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I was really like, they built that up, and I was like, oh man, now everybody's going. I think I'm really worried about what's going to happen there. But
I didn't mind it because I liked the way they shot the aftermath of Fangs walking down the hallway, getting autographs, carrying his guitar for some strange reason.
Keep an eye on Midge because that's where his heart is. You know what I mean?
That's what I'm talking about.
Beautiful. It was beautiful.
I thought, why didn't we get a Greendale? Why was the concert in Centerville? I thought it was the introduction to a new town, which I thought was sort of strange.
I think that's all right. They were just
maybe it makes sense as we go.
It's all right. I'm just saying I thought
it's just far away. It's a place they have to drive versus walk across the river, I guess, to Greendale or whatever.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, you got it all mapped out, I guess, over here?
I do. It's all up here.
Cartography?
I before we move on from the car stuff, I just wanted to say the car was really awesome. And it was great to see it finally out on the road doing its thing. So it was a lot of build up for that, and it really paid off.
I like that you take a little moment to actually talk directly to the car. I feel like you just did there. You're like, hey, I just want to take a second to say, I love you. I love you. And I miss you. And it's great to see you being driven by my friends, Archie and Reggie.
And just to be clear, that's your inside perspective. Previously, it was the outside perspective.
That's right. Yeah.
You never see Pete get as intimate as when he's talking about any car on any show that we talk about.
What else should we talk about? What other moments from the episode do you want to call out in particular?
We should talk about the end in a sec, but I want to talk about Archie performatively shaving. When I was like, this kid, he has no hair.
Yeah. He's supposed to be, like, 16 at this point?
Anyone that shaves at school is trying to prove that he went through puberty before everybody else. And Archie's there being like, has a full can of shaving cream on. He's like, I don't know. Yeah, well, should we take the car? And then they have the most passionate line reading of Mi Casa e Tu Casa than any ship has ever had on the show. The two of them.
That was so adorable, that moment.
That was them basically screaming, I love you to each other. It was very cute. It's just the language that we always highlight. They'll never jive with us getting circled, Fang said to Midge, implying married. I thought was great. Betty and Veronica calling the boys unlicked cubs was really funny. Sorry for miscounting the trumps. Great card terminology. Just fun stuff all across the board.
While we're talking about a dialogue, what's your tail, Nightingale? I dig that plan. There was some great, just absolutely fun lines in there for sure.
Great episode. Why don't we wrap it up here and talk about MVPs?
Hold on. I want to talk about the end of the episode.
Oh, right.
Well,
the end of the episode. Yeah.
where we actually, it's like you said earlier, Alex, like we don't get a lot of forward movement on the mystery until this last scene, which I thought was one of the best, like, little detective bits they did here, with a woman coming to ask about Rayberry. The cat heard the rattling of the milk bottles, and the cat is the key. Cat will remember that sound. She and Jughead then is putting together, like, the milkman showed up and there's no milk, so there's something going on here. We get to see this milkman again, who we saw a brief flash of before. He's a kid, which I think is a little bit of a twist. Most of the villains
Is
in
he a
this
kid?
series,
He seems
he's
to be
like,
an
It's
adult.
just creepy looking.
I
Well,
think your
he's a-
brain has been broken by the fact that we have mid to late 20s people playing teenagers. At this
Yeah,
point.
well,
I
but
think
I don't mean a kid. I don't mean a child. I mean he's not. Most of the villains
10.
are old people in Riverdale, or like parents, and this person seems more like in the chick level of age, taking the actors' ages out of it.
Okay.
And so and he looks like.
And
There's
remember, it is the
parents-
1950s, so he's probably 6 or 7 years old.
He's like a chickadee? Is that what you're saying?
Pete, you were
No.
forgetting Chick, the true hero.
True hero of Riverdale.
Oh, don't. We've been away from that bullshit for so long. We're never going back.
I know you didn't want to talk about speculation, but I am all of my fingers are crossed. The Chick come back towards the end of the season is like, guys, I got to take you back to the future. I'm going to save this.
Chick.
I think he's going to do it. I think it's going to be
That
Chick.
would be Chick
If
steps
he
out of a
says
time
back
machine.
to the
Yeah.
future,
A
I'll
DeLorean.
give you $1.
It's about your children.
And in this case, you are technically the children of
Yeah,
the,
you're
the
all
future.
children.
You're children now, and that's.
You're still children.
But it struck me that it was someone who is maybe a contemporary of.
Sorry,
of them.
I was just thinking about if the last episode they do jump to the future and still think they're 16. That would be pretty funny.
Yeah. Why do I have all this student loan debt?
Telling me I own a casino?
He looks a little bit like Howdy Doody. He looks a little bit
Yeah.
unsettling, the milkman.
Right. Creepy.
But I thought it was interesting because he did seem younger than I expected. That maybe this will
Because we
fold
saw
into,
an old milkman. That's why maybe that's messing with
No. We've only seen this, what Justin
They-
is calling younger milkman.
No, there is an older milkman
There is
who's
an
actual milkman,
an
not a
actual
murderer.
milkman. This guy just seems to carry milk. Is he delivering it? Clearly not. There's no milk in the refrigerator.
Well, the
and I guess
milkman-
after you kill somebody, maybe you don't need to deliver the milk. I'm not sure how that works.
don't waste the milk in a dead person's fridge. He's a
That
resourceful
old,
milkman.
that
Well,
old chestnut.
and I think milkmen are like dinosaurs, where they just slowly died out and became extinct. You can actually dig up milkman bones, and
that's
Because
how
they're
we-
the
and that's how
strongest.
we-
They're
that's
stronger than regular bones, so they're still
Yeah,
around.
exactly.
Because they have all the milk they drink.
And that's where you actually get milk from, is they distill the milk from the milkman bones.
Yeah, you see ancient bottles still full of milk there. But what I was trying to say is, my speculation is, I've been talking about how I feel like this season is maybe maximally about youth revolt, and eventually all the kids are going to throw off the shackles of their parents, the repression of the era, and whatever. And I think maybe the milkman is doing that by murdering people. So I think maybe thematically that will come together with the underlying theme of the season that I'm implying.
So the milkman is starting a rebellion by killing people? Is that what you're saying?
I think the milkman is killed Ethel's parents, right, and then killed Brad Rayberry, and I think those are two targets of older people who maybe he was targeting because they are seen as a way of getting revenge for some sort of repression or something like that. So I think it may thematically link up, even though the murderer is obviously taking it to a bad extreme.
Okay.
I guess we'll see. Why don't we wrap it up
I
here,
did.
though?
I did want to just talk about how the comics moment was funny when Jughead was like, "I'll take all the proceeds from the comics and we'll donate it to your family." I was like, "Oh man, I don't know how much comics are going to make, man, but it's a nice thought. It's a nice thought."
Comics are very popular in those days. They're not,
Sure.
Yeah.
But no, I don't know how many people would talk about comic book money, you know what I mean?
The print runs were much smaller, so that's why comics from that era now are so rare.
Yes.
Also, people
And
threw them away.
You need to remember that Jughead is 16 years old and doesn't understand money. So there you go. That might play into it. Let's talk about the MVP. Pete, who is your MVP for this episode?
Whew, it's hard. It's hard to pick. I'm gonna have to go Tabitha. I thought she was amazing in this episode, and it was just some real heartfelt moments. Got me in the feels. So it's yeah.
Wow. Justin?
Nice. Great stuff. I'm gonna go with Toni in this episode. I really liked the way that she sort of handled the relationship and sort of her chasing her own ends, and just strong looks and giant flasks. That's what.
Oh yeah, you got. I mean, the giant flasks.
Two great choices. This is tough. I think I'm going to go for Cheryl, I guess, in this episode. In that case,
No surprise there from Mr. Zaubin.
Well, no, I thought Tabitha was fantastic. I was going to pick Toni until you picked her, but I do think, like I was talking about, the way that Cheryl approached
I was going to pick
everything-
Reggie.
Reggie's also very good. Everybody's very good. I love everybody. But Cheryl was the one that gave me the most angst and the most nervousness. Like, that's the thing that I felt the most into here. And I'm really glad how things turned out. I'm really glad about the growth for the character and excited to see where it goes next. And for all of you, if you'd like to support this podcast and all the podcasts we do, patreon.com/Comic Book Club. Also, we do a live show every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. to Facebook and YouTube. Come hang out. We would love to chat with you about Riverdale. Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, or the app of your choice to subscribe, listen, and follow the show at Riverdale Dark on Twitter, Riverdale After on Instagram, Riverdale After Dark on Facebook, comicbookclublive.com for this podcast and many more. Until next time, we'll see you after dark.
Do you think there's a different skim milk man? Whose milk's like lighter?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's a
small.
little bit skinnier. A little bit skinnier.
That's the whole point of the ice.
And much younger. He's like 2 years
lighter.
old. Yeah.
Yeah.
2 years, by the way, is if you subtract 2 from the 6.
Please,
What's this
please
math
stop
teacher
recording.
flex you've been doing? I'm revolting against you.